Hi, and welcome to Seattle Taxi Company BI System. My name is Jack Willis. I'm here with Sammy, Levi, and Scott Turner. Seattle Taxi. Well, what we are is a Seattle-based cab company that services the 425, 206, 360, and 253 area codes. After getting user feedback, some of the things that we came across that you were having problem with in your original system is difficulty tracking customer behavior. This means whenever a customer uses our services, knowing different things about them as far as where they're being picked up, how much they're paying. Also, how miles are allocated to specific vehicles, meaning which vehicles are driving to which locations, how often they're making the trip, and the total number of miles that is associated with that specific vehicle. The efficiency of drivers was another problem that was there was trouble to there was a problem for you to track because there wasn't enough information for drivers where they're driving, how often they're making trips. The miles that were performed after a service was an additional problem because you need to know how far a driver was going after a service had been performed. So is another thing we hope to improve upon. The objective is to develop a business intelligence OLAP system. And for decision makers and management, this means that we track the efficiency of assets and employees. We also want to increase the understanding of how various operations affect the bottom line. So what does our business process look like for this BI system? Cab drivers initially respond to a call from a customer around the city, and the driver goes to areas that we service and picks up a customer. We apply certain rates depending on the area they're picked up, which has been predetermined by us along different factors such as traffic and the distance they have to travel. Once the driver drops off the customer, we've entered the amount of miles driven and the total fee of the service is put into our system later so we can track that. Also, customers have their information stored, so we're able to search different customer attributes and track them more efficiently. Our system is used to track the profitability and efficiency of cab drivers and their vehicles. We want to gauge the highest density regions within the city in regards to consumer needs, so making sure that we have enough drivers to service the amount of customers in one area and to take drivers away from areas where they don't need to service as many customers. Specifically, the measurement event that we're going to be using is our system will track every time a driver bills a customer at the end of a service.
So when management first came to us, they had a couple of different specifications they had that they wanted us to look at and to try to build a BI system to address. So first off, one example of a business user need would be the fact that taxi cab their drivers right now are not being efficiently used. So management needs help locating where the efficiencies are and how to reallocate these drivers to over or underworked areas and to make sure that underworked drivers are put in areas that need more work. Another business need there is that management wanted to reevaluate certain rates applied to specific locations. So in this system, certain rates would be applied to a certain area. So for instance, downtown Seattle would be charged $4.25 for every mile driven. So business users want to be able to look at this over time to see how changing these certain rates affects their profitability in certain areas and how to basically make their business as profitable as possible. So the BI solution is to build a BI system that is able to take specific measures that users want to track, and these would be basically dollar amount values or numerical values that you want to cut up later. So in our system it would be miles driven, time length of service, or the rate applied, etc. So a user wants to take these certain measurements and to cut these up into useful segments, which would be dimensions. So our dimensions that we would have would be customer or driver or vehicle. So what you want to be able to do is to take up these amounts, say invoice amount, and we'll be able to cut it up into useful segments. So you can find out which locations are the most profitable or which drivers are being utilized the best. The end goal, however, is to build a BI cube and to be able to make reports later on. So we're going to be able to show you a couple reports from different analysis services. In particular, we're going to be showing you Tableau and SQL Server analysis services. So you'll be able to see over time visually how different decisions are affecting the profitability and utilization of the assets within the company.
Now, although all these dimensions are great, we need to figure out a way to measure and keep track of our end goal, which is our profitability, our profit margins, and so on and so forth. So, in order to do this, our measures are going to be time length of the cab trips, the miles driven, the rate charged, and the total invoice amount charged to a customer. So, for instance, what we can do is we can see how many miles a taxi cab driver has driven and how much money he's made in accordance with those miles compared to the other drivers. So again, for another example, time length is just the amount of time between pickup and drop off. Rate is a specific service that will be determined by the time zones. Miles driven is going to be the amount of miles that have been driven from the time of pickup to the time of drop off. And the fact measure is just going to be the service fact table. So this is a fact grain. This is going to show exactly what type or how it's going to look like when we store the data that we need for measures. So let's take the first row, for instance. We have 25 miles driven at a rate of 2.75. Our invoices amount is 73.75. Notice that the invoice amount is a little bit larger if you, than a straight multiplication is because we have tax included in that. The time length of service was 30 minutes, so it took 30 minutes to do this certain trip. And then here's where it gets interesting is we can check to see which driver is the one who did the service, which vehicle, if it what customer it was, if there was a multiple or if there was a multiple, and the pickup location as well. And of course there's a date time to see what day it was. So overall, this is how the database is going to look. The taxi fact links up all the dimensions because we could look up every single fact or every single measure depending on what dimensions we want to use. For instance, if you want to see what customers have frequented our services, we can do that. Or let's say what vehicle type has had the most miles or which vehicle type has had the most invoice amount.
Here's a list of our system dimensions. We have customer, vehicle, driver, pickup, location, and date time. We're going to use these to be able to break down our measures and really create some reports on these dimensions. Here is an example of a couple of our tables breaking down with their attributes. In this slide you see pickup location is broken up in a hierarchy of pickup location, dim city, and dim area code. We did this so we could break down larger areas into smaller areas into the specific pickup location so we can kind of measure where our highest volume of people we're picking up is, and what city, what area, where we need to allocate more resources. This is just the time hierarchy continued, or another kind of continuation from the previous slide. Here is one of our first reports. So this report is showing the drivers and their last name and then the invoice amount, and it's broken down by the colors into each color is a specific region. As you see on the left, Ballard is blue or dark blue, for example, and as you can see, it looks like George on the far right. He's by far making the most money in that area.
Okay, so here we have another report also done in Tableau. So on the left you can see it's similarly using region name to color coordinate. It has the miles driven on the left hand side, and then the city is along the bottom. So this shows users where the most miles are being driven and within the city, which areas. So being a Seattle based company, you can see that the Seattle area has the largest total amount of miles driven for the company, and areas like Linwood and Kirkland have less, which allows people that make decisions and the users to see how they need to allocate the resources in terms of placing drivers and which vehicles they want to put in different areas. So it's overall a pretty useful report if you are making decisions as far as how to place drivers and vehicles.
Here's another report. This one is more on asset allocation. And what we've done here is on the y-axis we have the taxi fact count for the first report, and for the second one below it we have invoice amounts. And we're able to cut this up by different vehicle types. So at the bottom you can see the first row is hybrid, and then after that is party van, and then sedan and van. So what this report will do is show you which types of vehicles are being utilized the most. And if you are to click on if you're actually within Tableau and not within a PowerPoint, you can actually click on each of these different bars. And so like I could click here if I wanted to, and it would show you the amount of services or fact counts for each of these bars and the total amount of invoice or fact count for each of these. So you can see if you were to click here on Van, you'd be able to see that there were 2 different instances and that there was a total of $100 earned. So this is a very dynamic report. It's not simply static. We can actually go in there and adjust it if we were doing it within the actual system.
So some lessons we learned is the importance of creating a effective fact table early on and establishing what measures we plan on using. When you start this project at the beginning of the semester, you're not really thinking about, the final product, but it's important to set yourself up for success because each part of the project lies critically on the part before it. So here's Levi.
All right, so I think one of the big things I learned from this project was, well, a couple things. I think I learned that there's a big emphasis in BI on teamwork and making sure that you coordinate well with your team members, knowing who's still in the team and who's dropped out and stuff like that. But I mean, in all seriousness, I think one of the biggest things I learned was basically, I think it's very important to know what the end goal is going into a project, rather than simply trying to just barrel down and look at each individual piece. So I think definitely for future students it's very important to get your hands dirty within the reports first before you actually go in and build the system, because I mean, how are you supposed to know how to build a car if you've never seen a car before?
Okay, so some lessons I've learned are it's important to understand what your topic is going to be about and what it's going to entail, because if you decide to create something about a topic that's really cool but you don't know much about, you're not going to know what measures you're going to need, you're not going to understand those measures, and you're going to get confused. Another thing is keep it simple, because if you're going to have multiple fact tables, that means you're going to have a lot of different types of data and a lot of different types of data that you have to fill. And if you just kept it simple, you're going to have a lot of data points and create really creative tables and create a lot of creative reports and make it look really good, versus having a lot of different types of dimensions and making those reports look really bad.
One of the lessons I learned is, especially true with BI and using SQL Server, is to allow yourself and your team a lot of time to complete whatever tasks you want to, because there can be the simplest thing that's going to hold you up that you only anticipated to work an hour on, and you're there for 3 hours trying to create a calculated measure. So allow for extra time, and just be flexible, because you don't know how long each part's going to take. And again, I think another important thing is choose something you're interested in, or something that has interesting aspects to it. Because if you choose a project at the beginning that you really have no interest in, it's not going to get any easier to work on and create measures and dimensions for something that's terribly boring. So I guess that would probably be my final lesson that we've learned. So it's been great, and this is Seattle Taxi Company, and with that we leave you.